Thanks for joining us remotely here. I'll formally call the meeting to order. The first item on the agenda is to approve the agenda. Any comment move that if there's no comments? Anyone? I'll take it as carried.
Looks good.
Okay. Declaration of conflicts of interest. Anybody have anything they need to declare?
None.
I'm getting some feedback on the line. Someone could mute their microphone. That'd be great. Okay. Okay, then let's just no conflicts declared. Let's go to the consent agenda, and I'll turn it over to Lisa to highlight the key messages. I would just make a comment that we've got a very clean and straightforward audit agenda today, and no major issues, but some stuff to talk about. So let's turn it over to Lisa and go through the key messages.
Thanks very much, Kevin. In terms of the key messages, that particular, I don't know, I know if you're going to bring that up. What I might do, Kevin, is just highlight some items related to this, to the macro dashboard.
Yeah.
Just at a very high level, all the materials in the Farm Committee agenda today are for information, and they are part of our regular quarterly update in terms of the Farm Finance Audit Risk Management Committee mandate. So they're in accordance with the mandate. And we can discuss specific items as we proceed through the agenda, but specific to the macro dashboard, that's the, I don't know if you can bring that up, I know if you're trying to, that's the page that shows 3 pie charts, and it gives an overview of the health of 3 key areas that are of interest to the Farm Committee. The first one relates to our corporate plan performance, and that shows how we're performing or tracking against our board-approved corporate plan for the fiscal year 2020-21. And if you just move to the next one, I know with the 3 pies. So you'll see, if you look at that, go to the next one.
Gosh.
It's okay. I guess it's after the minutes.
Okay.
This one, that's it. Thank you. So you'll see for the first pie chart, that's our corporate plan performance. Overall, we are forecasting after the first quarter, the first 3 months of our fiscal year, that we are planning to achieve around 80% overall in terms of our key deliverables, our capital investment plan, and our revenues. And you'll see that the key deliverables is orange because that one is slightly under the 80. It's at 78%. So we show things that are green if they're 80% and above. And if it's 70 to 80, it's orange or yellow. And then if it's below 70, it would be a red. So the overall 80% level is a direct correlation to the construction resequencing that was required on the Portland's flood protection project. And that was to address some of the project challenges we had encountered last year and to still maintain our 2024 completion date. So in particular, some components that we'd planned to do this year have shifted into the next fiscal year, and so our cash flows have followed. In terms of the next pie chart, the finance and admin, you'll see there's 4 categories there, including liquidity, enterprise risk management, internal audit, and financial reporting compliance. And the good news there is you'll see that everything there is green, meaning that we currently have no concerns. Importantly, from a liquidity standpoint, the corporation remains in a very strong cash position. We have no forecast requirement to borrow externally in the next 36 months. And we are utilizing some of our existing internal cash resources to temporarily fund certain projects that have some cash flow timing differences. And there is a graph that supports the liquidity in our forecast for cash. I would just like to highlight or caveat that comment slightly in that for the Portland's flood protection project, while governments are up to date with funding that project and we continue to receive their full cooperation, there is some timing risk related to the funding for the project for the rest of the year. The corporation targets to have a working capital level of about 90 days worth of expenditures, which on the cash flow graph is the red line. And that typically would be around the amount of 80 to 100 million at any one time. And so there's a need at this time to well, the risk stems from the fact there's a need to revisit the annual amounts that governments are funding for the project, as well as certain funding milestones that are set out in the funding agreement between the three governments and Waterfront Toronto. And this is based on our updated expenditure forecasts and our target working capital level. So the cash flow risks really stems from the time that it may require to approve the changes to the contribution agreement, because it will need to be amended. So it could be that that time period may be greater than 3 months, which is our working capital amount of the 90 days. So we may see a decrease temporarily in our working capital for the project. However, we are working closely with governments on this issue, and we continue to monitor the situation.
Lisa, Patrick has his hands up. I think he has a question.
Great.
Patrick, go ahead.
Yeah, thank you, Lisa. I just I had a question regarding the facility. The time, if you could just give us an update, given that we had discussed previously increasing the size of the
Line of credit.
size of the facility. Thanks.
Patrick, you did cut in and out there. Were you talking about Waterfront Toronto's borrowing facility and
Okay.
the amount?
I can just put it. I can put it in the chat.
Okay.
I did just put it in the chat, just on the credit facility and increasing the size of the facility and the cost.
Okay. So
If you
at the
can hear me.
moment, yeah, I can hear you then. So with respect to the credit facility, from our banks and our lenders' point of view, we have no issue in terms of being able to increase that beyond the current $40 million limit. The other part of the borrowing facility relates to government consent. We require government's consent to borrow and for a specific amount. So currently our government consent is for 40 million, and it's for 3 years to May or March 2023. So we would require approval from all three levels of government to increase that to 40 million. We haven't formally requested that at this time because our cash flow forecast graph shows that we're forecasting to be above 50 million for the next 36 months. There are risks that are being monitored and managed. And if those risks begin to escalate or look like they are going to become more likely to occur, then we'll look at formally requesting an increase. We did, because we just received an extension to that recently. We want to make sure we do really need to request an increase before we formally do so. But governments have said that they would be open to that if indeed we could show and demonstrate a need for it.
Yeah, I mean, if I could just follow up, I don't think there's a greater need than COVID in terms of showing that you don't know when you might need it. So to that degree, I would recommend asking for it now, as long as the cost of doing so is minimal. Thank you.
Thanks for that. So we will look at that further. Thanks, Patrick.
Jeannie also has a hands up.
Yeah, go ahead, Jeannie.
Hi, good morning. I agree with Patrick about looking into extending the credit facility sooner rather than later. We're not under business as usual, so I guess the usual timelines that we're used to, I think we should definitely be adding several more months to that. And also, if we have a second wave coming, who knows what's going to happen in terms of people, productivity going down and people who are not available. So I agree with that. Lisa, I wanted to, about the cash flow, I mean, I see that as a huge risk item, obviously. If I am reading this correctly, the Q4 21-22, that big bump in revenue is an assumption that we're selling the Quayside land for 250 million. Is that correct?
It's not quite 250 million that's coming in at that time, but that's the timing of when we are forecasting to receive the first tranche of the Quayside land sale revenues for, say, blocks 1 and 2.
Oh, okay. And how much are we assuming? I mean, I guess you're kind of
I wouldn't,
calculating.
I wouldn't want to necessarily disclose that in the open session.
Oh, okay. Okay.
But happy to talk to
Oh,
about
okay.
that.
But that's the okay.
But that's the jump.
Okay. And have we run different scenarios, kind of timing scenarios, worst case scenario in particular? If there are any delays, from what I understand right now, because we have a consolidated bank account, we're basically borrowing funds that are, and with the intention, obviously, of paying it back, but just want to make sure that we're covering ourselves off. That this is, I assume that this isn't the only cash flow. Maybe there's other kind of different scenario versions that you're running as well.
Yeah, this is like this version is the most likely version.
The most likely, yeah.
Yes. And
okay.
we have run other scenarios. And what we've said is, even if we don't realize the first tranche of Quayside for another year, we're okay till March 2023 in terms of our cash flow being above zero. It's after March 2023 where there's the risk, where we need either to realize the revenues, or we need more greater borrowing flexibility.
Okay, and we know exactly what that amount is.
We're actually updating our long-term planning, our long-term plan in terms of our expenditures and our funding right now. So we're just going through that exercise to look at any financial pressures and to update that. But yes, we're working on that, and we will, when we present the rolled forward strategic plan to the farm committee and the board in November and December, we'll report further on that.
Okay, and sorry, one more follow-up. A related question to this is the mandate extension. George, what's the update on that? I was just reading that that's on an ongoing thing. There's some strategy session or something happening this fall?
Yeah, there's a strategic review that is being undertaken by all three levels of the government that will be undertaken over the fall and into the winter. So that'll help us. We are good until 2028 based on, quite frankly, a letter that I had sent back when I was with the province and confirmed with the minister at the time. So we should be okay. We would just like to make broader reference to that extension to 2028 because that is not necessarily well known out there. So as we're negotiating, we do want to make sure that individuals who are participating in any kind of transaction with us know that we're good until at least 2028.
Okay, so we're just expecting that to be, I guess, formalized. But it's really already been approved or verbally agreed to. Okay, that's good. That's important to know. Thank you.
Back to you, Lisa. Or...
Sorry, I was on mute. I apologize.
Okay.
So the last couple of comments I would just make on this, on the macro dashboard, from the finance and administrative point of view, in terms of our internal audit plan, and the volume of audits this year from our audit dashboard, which is on page 20. There is a significant volume or an increase in volume of audits this year. There's a number of government audits as well as our typical internal audits and our external audits and the review that BTY does. So I just wanted to highlight that to the committee. This is an organization that has historically heavily audited. We've had upwards of 60 audits over the last 17 years, which is an average of about 3.5 audits a year. This year, the number is 9. And having said that, we're under control from that point of view, where we have enough resources to manage that volume this year, and a number of them have been completed. It does result in a culture of continuous improvement, which we have, and which is a great aspect or spin-off from having a lot of audits. But the committee should be aware that there are a significant number of audits this year, and we're a heavy audited organization. And the final pie on the middle, finance and admin, relates to financial reporting compliance. We've prepared our quarter end June 30 financial statements. These are unaudited and are not actually required legislatively or by regulation. We prepare them as a best practice in terms of good governance. and these continue to demonstrate that we're currently in a strong fiscal position. The final pie chart on the macro dashboard relates to capital projects, which is under David Custeran's management. And I will just highlight here that there's currently 2 yellow status items under the Portland's Flood Protection Project and the Complete Communities. Yellow meaning that there's a caution related to budget and schedule risk for Portland's flood protection. It relates to some elevated risk related to utilities, which the committee is aware of, as well as a new caution area related to our stormwater management facility for East Bayfront. Both situations are being actively managed by management, and David could speak to both of these if further questions arise. So with that, Kevin, I don't know if there are any other aspects of the consent agenda that you would like myself or David to speak to. There's also in there, we've got our fundraising action plan update, which Kathleen is on the line to speak to. We've got our quarterly procurement report. David's dashboards on the capital projects are there as well. So if there are any questions on any of those items.
Jeannie and Patrick have their hands up.
Great.
Yeah, from my perspective, I just see that the cybersecurity risk has been relatively high. It would only be increased due to the remote work. I'm just wondering if we could get a little more of an update there and maybe an understanding of why it's not a higher priority. That's my first question, and so I'll do a follow-up once you've answered that. Thank you.
Okay. So just to directly answer your question, Patrick, the cybersecurity is a high priority item. We had MMP, our internal auditors, do a detailed internal audit in that area 2 years ago in 2018. And there are a number of recommendations which we have been actively implementing and prioritizing over the last 2 years. There are some that are still there because either they are more timely, they take more time to implement, or when we had procured them, the costs came back high, and now we've found more cost-effective solutions that work just as effectively. We have had MMP come back over the fall to do a follow-up audit on our cybersecurity in terms of what we've implemented over the last 2 years. And at the Farm Committee meeting in November, they'll present their findings and we'll report on the implementation that we've done. And you'll see from their interim results so far, we've actually brought down the risk quite significantly. And we continue to improve and enhance our cybersecurity initiatives, because it is a high priority area.
Lisa, do you want to reference the training that all the staff have gone through?
Absolutely. So part of the recommendations was annual cybersecurity training for all staff. That's mandatory. So in May, we had a third party come in to have the entire staff go through cybersecurity training. Another aspect of that, which is a phase 2 that was recommended by MNP that we will be also implementing, is actually having phishing expeditions, which is when there's, you receive an email and you click on it and it may be a fraudulent type of email, where we actually follow up the training by kind of testing that on staff, so that if they do click on an email that maybe is not appropriate to have been clicked on, that there's a follow-up training for staff members to highlight the fact that this was a fraudulent phishing expedition, and it's an updated type of a training. We also had our accounting, finance, procurement, and project controls team go through another set of training prior to that. So now we've had the entire firm trained, and we'll continue to train everyone on an annual basis.
Thanks. And my last question is just regarding, the importance of that 90% design stage gate will have likely a meaningful impact on liquidity. So I would suggest, I would have an interest to know, rather than wait till the farm to understand where that liquidity or what the impact is to liquidity as soon as the 90% design stage gate is complete, because that would, to me, be an important trigger for that credit facility. So if we could have that follow up, that would be appreciated. Thank you.
Absolutely, we can do that.
I think Jeannie's next.
Hi. Also on the consent agenda, item 3D, quarterly procurement report for Kevin Newsom. I just had a question regarding a couple of the items here. The 25,000 to own innovation. It references Quayside. I'm just a bit confused. Are we still procuring for Quayside IP type of stuff?
Kevin, do you want to address that? Kevin Newsom?
Yeah. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Can you hear me fine?
Yep.
Yes, that is just a leftover from the previous RFP and the MIDP process, and it is so it is completing itself right now. It's fully invoiced. No work is being done.
Oh, okay. So that was just a catch up in terms of the paperwork.
Yep.
Okay. Second question regarding the Menkes. I said that they had paid a substantial bill to Toronto Hydro on our behalf. I'm assuming there's no markup or anything on that. That's just like they just kind of floated the cash for us, or did we have to pay some sort of interest or something to them?
David, perhaps you could answer.
Probably Meg.
Or Meg.
Yeah. I don't think Meg's on, unfortunately.
Yeah, no, I can't answer it. No, it was simply a pass through. So they paid the hydro bill because they needed to get the equipment out of the way of their construction. But under the terms of our project agreement, it was we agreed to reimburse them. So it was a straight pass through of costs. And had we paid hydro directly, it wouldn't have even shown up in this because payments to hydro are exempt from our the sole source reporting policies.
Is this something that's common? Like, is there a reason why we didn't pay it? I mean, I'm just curious.
It's not. No, it's not common. In fact, this is this is probably an unusual one, and I think it was done simply to facilitate this particular project. So
okay,
it was part of that.
Okay, so this is something that we're not going to see this again, or shouldn't.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I wouldn't mind just with Kathleen on the line to hear a quick update on the on how you're feeling about the fundraising and where we're at. We haven't. I can't remember if we had one last time, but probably should have a very quick update on the fundraising campaign and committee formation. Are you there?
Sure. Yes, I am here. Good morning, everybody. Thanks very much, Kevin, for the interest in the fundraising. Just a bit of a recall of where we're at. So last year in December, we prepared the fundraising action plan, and the fundraising action plan essentially has sort of three main sort of initiatives underlying it. And the first is to build Waterfront Toronto's fundraising capabilities, and the capabilities were, the need to do that was identified by the gap analysis that was performed by KCI. And the second is to kind of prepare a campaign or get ready for a campaign to raise money for the Destination Playground, which is, and it will be a major gift campaign. And then the third is to actually advance the projects themselves, of which the focus is on Destination Playground, because that's the first project that we're going to be raising money for. So in the sort of 9 months since then, sorry, there's some work going on in my house. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. Sorry about that, everyone. So in the 9 months since then, we've been making progress, and part of that is, and that progress is summarized on the action plan dashboard. A key thing that we're doing is to try to achieve alignment with the City of Toronto. And in order to do that, we are developing a memorandum of understanding to kind of set out how we're going to work together as we, as Waterfront Toronto essentially raises money for projects that will ultimately be transferred to the city. Yes, I think so we've made a lot of progress in that area, as well as working towards hiring professional fundraising staff. We've got a fundraising director job description that we've developed and we're about to post. We've made a lot of progress on the case for support as well for the destination playground, and then work on the actual playground project has advanced to the point where we've completed the 10% design. That's it, unless people have questions.
Yes, Patrick has his hand up.
Hi, thanks. Appreciate you trying to keep the economy going too with the reno. It was for Lisa. Just
Okay.
the philanthropic cash flows. When do they enter into the cash flow assessment that you did? You referenced earlier, and if so, when does one of those cash flows, positive cash flows, hit the books?
Thanks for the question, Patrick. So in terms of the philanthropic cash flows, we're not showing any fundraising related revenues in those cash flows because it's too uncertain at this time. And likewise, the expenditure that would match those inflows have not been shown. So the only cash flows that are reflected are about $4 million, which or less now. The $4 million that we had originally included in our corporate plan for this year, for the 15 months from January 1st, 2020 to March 31st, 2021 to actually implement this fundraising action plan. So we had already secured funding for that through some of our own revenues. And so that's the only part that's reflected in the cash flow at this time.
Appreciate the prudence. Thank you.
Okay. Jeannie, did you have a question?
Oh.
Yes, a quick question regarding the fundraising. Am I correct in assuming that the playground only goes ahead if we are successful in raising the money needed? I saw a note here that perhaps Quayside Land Sale also has a potential to offset funding gap. Or
Yes,
are we standing firm on if we don't? Are we going to delay it, or if the fundraising doesn't meet our timetable?
For sure, the destination playground is subject to funding. We are looking at other sources as well to supplement or complement fundraising. It may be we are able to secure some funding through Quayside land sale revenues. We may be able to secure some funding from, say, the City of Toronto Parks. There may be some other sources. So we're not necessarily saying that needs to be 100% on fundraising. There may be some other sources that could complement it to help. And Chris, you've got your hand up. You may want to comment.
Yes, hi, it's Chris Glashek, also involved in the fundraising. I also just wanted to note for the board that we do have in our back pocket what we're calling a plan B, which is if we aren't successful in raising money, we have a kind of baseline landscape design for that area so that we won't have a big hole in our park. We just wouldn't have destination play. So we are trying to plan for both eventualities. Hopefully we're successful, but if not, we have a plan if we can't move ahead with it.
Thanks, Chris.
George has his hands up too.
Yeah, I just wanted to add to that. As Kathleen said, we're working with the city on a protocol on the fundraising, partly because there are concerns that we don't cannibalize the list of philanthropists that they also can on. So we're working that out. Just a little bit of background on that. But to the discussion of funding and our dependency on the fundraising, we are also looking at other sources. And For example, it is public now that, there is negotiations going on by a developer with regards to the convention center just over on Bay Street here. And there could be contributions from that agreement that would go to projects. For example, the Jack Layton Ferry Terminal could benefit from contribution from that. So there are other sources other than just the direct fundraising from the public that we are also negotiating with various parties. I'll put my hand down, I think.
I think Ginny has her hands up again.
Sorry, one last question on the consent agenda. It's not regarding fundraising though, so are we, can I ask it or?
That's fine. Go ahead, Jeannie.
Oh, okay. I had a question regarding the environmental liability, the reporting that you did on our compliance. Just regarding environmental liability in particular, I noted that there were some spills and everything was taken care of. But is there follow-up, David, in terms of, the ministry comes back, they double check and say, hey, everything's clear, and we get some sort of sign off?
Absolutely, when the spill is a reportable spill. When it's not a reportable spill, there is still follow-up and sign-off by our environmental team. So while some of the spills may be such that they need to be reported to the city and province, and those are spills that potentially enter into the Lake Ontario retaining channel. We've had some of those, and they've been water spills, by the way, as opposed to anything else. But yeah, they are absolutely done. Reports are done. The ministry will follow up, come back to the site, and sign off that any mitigation and additional work has been undertaken. So, and then they're closed out in that way.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Any other questions from anyone? I noted that we didn't, Ian, approve the minutes from our May 28th meeting. Let's do that now. Is there any comments on those minutes? Can I get if not, can I get a motion to approve them?
I'll move that. Kevin, it's Jeannie.
Okay, thanks, Jeannie.
I'll second it.
Okay, thanks. There's a note on the unaudited financial statements. Lisa, do you? I'm not sure we have to go through that unless there's something that you want to highlight in there. In the, I think it's explained in the cover sheet, but is there anything you want to highlight to us?
I'll just ask Sampado, who's our Director of Financial Management, who's responsible for the financial statements, to give a 1-2 minute highlight on the financial statements. Sampado?
Okay.
Thanks, Lisa. I could certainly do that. If we can go to page 35 of the material, which is where the financial statements are. So what this is just the unaudited financial statements for the 3 months from April 1st, 2020 to June 30th, 2020. Just some key highlights in the statement of financial position and statement of financial activities, and that should be it. I can draw attention to page 35, which is the statement of financial position. Key activities or key items are cash. Cash at 97.8 million, which is 98 million, is high as a result of the working capital for the Portlands. If you go down under liabilities, you'll see deferred contributions of 105 million. Again, if you look at the cash and deferred contributions, they are in alignment. And that's basically the working capital that we get from the city for the Portlands expenditures. If I can just...
Michael has his hand up.
Sure. Yeah, Michael?
Yeah, just a quick question. Can you please remind me of what the materiality threshold is for the financials?
So you're talking about from an audit standpoint, Michael?
Yeah, correct.
It's 2 million. Okay. But the auditors do look at any errors that come up that they might notice, or any kind of misstatements. They would look at anything below that as well and report that to the committee. When they reported the year end for the March 31st audit, they noted no misstatements that hadn't been adjusted.
Great, thank you.
One more point on the statement of financial position, which is the assets under development. you will see that these really are the expenditures of the corporation's expenditures or investments in building assets. And from March 31st, since March 31st, 2020 to June 30th, 2020, we've had about 79 million in expenditures, primarily for the portlets. If we can go down to page 36 of the statements, which is the statement of financial activities. For the 3-month period between April to June, we do not have any government contributions. Again, this is directly related to the timing of when we request funding for the portlets primarily. We didn't have any requests for funding in this quarter, but we'll definitely have it in the next quarter, in Q2. The one significant item is it's almost the last line, the second last line is the land sale proceeds, which builds really our retained earnings. These are the land sale proceeds from the land sales in Bayside for Bayside lands and the Waterfront Innovation Center. So that builds our unrestricted surplus. And one last item, which basically is significant and noteworthy to mention, is in the notes. And if we go down to page, which is going to appear, this is a note on the unrestricted surplus. If it is on page number 43 of the material, and this basically actually ties back to what Lisa had mentioned regarding the the timing of certain expenditures and the revenues that fund them. You can look at, if you look at the deficits, we had a deficit about 16.7 million at the end of March. That deficit has now reduced to about 5 million at the end of June. And that's only because of the land sale revenues that we have had in this quarter for the Bayside lands and the Waterfront Innovation Center. One point to note is that this deficit is now going to build up slightly till we get the next tranche of our funding from our land sale revenues. And as Lisa discussed in the liquidity cash flow, this first tranche of land revenues is now expected in almost Q4 21-22, and that would be our Bayside land sales, at which point this deficit will reverse. These are the key significant items I thought I should go through, but if there are any specific questions on any of the other items, I'm willing to take.
Patrick has his hand up.
Sure.
Thank you. I had a quick question on page 39 on the receivables.
Yeah.
Just rent and other receivables. My first question was if any of that was at risk. And the second question is typically, would we have receivables that are not government-related receivables? Because that clearly seems to be the bulk of our receivables, so no real credit issues there, just timing issues.
These are just timing issues. Sorry, yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, so with the
so these are just timing issues.
It would just be a timing issue. That's fine.
That's right.
Yeah, but
and
with
most of these receivables
with the rent and receivables. With the rent and receivables, that there could be a credit element to it. So I just want to understand if this is the typical size of the rent and receivables that are non-government oriented.
The rent and receivables are basically mostly property related rent and receivables, some interest receivables. So there's nothing at risk over here of realizing. It's just a timing issue. There's specifically the 1.89 million.
And is the size of that typically small in that $2 million range, or can it be?
No, it is. It's typically in the $2 million range, because all of the other receivables, if they were like contribution agreements or something like that, they wouldn't be bunched together in the rent and receivables. They would be specifically called out as receivables from City of Toronto or province, as the case may be.
No, so I realize that. I'm just looking to understand if there, what aspect or what credit exposure we have to non-government entities.
So Lisa, do you want to just comment on, we have private sector tenants, and this, I'm hearing that this is within the reasonable range of receivables that we have, but is there risk given the COVID that I think Patrick's also pointing to?
Yeah, so this is $2 million would be our kind of average exposure to Sampado's point. In terms of COVID-related risk, we do have some credit exposure for our parking facility at 7 Queens Quay, where we've had a significant drop in the volume of people parking there, frankly. Over the summer, that picked right back up with the ferries opening and the island being open. So we've been able to get back to the normal levels, especially for the summer and the early fall. However, it's likely that we will see a bit of a drop in parking revenues, and so it could be about a $500,000 impact to the corporation in terms of those other revenues.
I think Mike.
Okay, great.
Michael also has a question.
Yeah, thanks. Just to add on to that comment, minor comment, but just on the receivables, maybe put a link up in the balance sheet to note 3, and then maybe we should add a little description below the receivables chart that we're showing there in note 3, just to explain, a bit of what we just discussed might be helpful. That was it.
We can do that. Thanks, Michael and Patrick.
I had another question. I don't see anyone else's hand up, but I had a question. I saw the reference that the credit facility availability was reduced to 37 million as a result of a letter of credit being issued. What's the value of the aggregate value of LOCs outstanding?
It's Michael. It's approximate just under 3 million, and it's just one letter of credit to the Department of Fisheries and Oceans related to our aquatic habitat work for the Portlands. So DFO basically holds a letter of credit to make sure that we have built the aquatic habitat appropriately in accordance with their standards. So that would be released. David, when would that be released? In a couple of years' time, once they're satisfied?
That's right. Once they are convinced, or once we've once we've shown them that we've constructed the additional habitat and that it is surviving, so it's a several-year process. At that point, they'll release the letter of credit.
There's only one letter of credit outstanding, and it's just under 3 million.
Just a follow-up to that, I typically see debt instruments like letters of credit, usually on the balance sheet, that they're set out as a separate item instead of just being. I think here you're probably lumping it either in other liabilities and settlements or current liabilities. I'm not sure which category, but typically I would have seen it broken out, but I don't see that unless I'm missing it.
Yeah, our letter of credit is an off-balance sheet item. It is not recognized as a liability. It's just disclosed, and that's in accordance with our auditors have signed off on that accounting treatment.
Got it. Okay, that makes more sense. Okay.
Okay, anything else on the financial statements? Trying to continue to move us along.
I just had, sorry, Kevin, if we're just on this, I saw there was also the transfer of art to the city, about 2.5 million. Just wanted to get a sense of what that was and how that transfer worked.
So there was a deed of transfer which was executed to the city for this public art, for the Front Street public art. And the way that it works is, if you look at the assets under development, when we incur those expenditures, we typically capitalize them. But when they are transferred out, they basically are backed out of the assets under development and also on net assets. So this was basically a deed of transfer which was executed with the city, based on which we have recorded the transfer in our books.
Okay. And Michael, this is typical for most of the assets and infrastructure that Waterfront Toronto is responsible for building. Once it's completed and has gone through a warranty maintenance period, it is transferred over to the city, and you'll see that transfer come off our books and our assets under development balance decrease.
Got it. Got it. Thanks so much. Thank you. Nothing else from me.
Okay, thank you. Are we going to turn it over to David now for an update?
Yeah, you want me to update the Portland's flood protection dashboard, Kevin?
If there's anything you think you should highlight in there, any changes, I think you can take it as read, but is there anything else that you want to highlight for us?
No, I guess on the 90% stage gate, I will highlight that we have completed the literally as of this week the 90% stage gate draft, and just as a quick summary, with the exception of the utilities issues, which we can discuss in closed session if you want to, with exception of those utility issues, we are, well, in fact, that's not true. With the exception of one of the utility issues, we are forecasting the project to be complete at or within the budget, within the approved budget and schedule. And in fact, are forecasting 72% probability of completing under budget, which is essentially the same percentage as we were forecasting at the 60 and 30% stage gates based on the EAC. We are also looking at potentially reimbursement of some costs related to these utilities, and should that happen, our probability of completion within budget actually rises to 90%. In terms of status, we will be reviewing this next week with the Federal Government Oversight Committee as well as the Executive Steering Committee. We will take their input and do a final 90% report as of October to the ESC. That will also be presented to the Intergovernmental Steering Committee, which is the committee comprised of the senior level government managers. And then we'll be coming to the Farm Committee in November and subsequently to the board in December with the final 90% update. But I would say that generally speaking, it's a very positive result at this stage. Subject to, I can update you on the utilities issues and in closed session. The construction is going very well. We're about 2 weeks away from completing the deep excavation in the Central River Valley, and we'll be beginning the liner, the river liner, so the environmental liner, again in the next 2 weeks. And we'll be commencing the deep excavation in the ice management and Don Greenway areas, which is the north-south portion of the river, and expect that to be completed by around the end of the year. So construction's proceeding very well and on schedule, notwithstanding COVID, where we've seen very little impact to date.
Okay, thanks, David. Just thinking aloud, David, does it make any to reschedule a tour of what's going on down there before the weather turns really cold? Can we go on site? Is that
yes, we can.
Is there enough?
So Kevin, I actually had my hand up on that issue, Kevin. We are going to be receiving one of our first bridges by the end of October, beginning of November. So we could do a tour earlier, or it may be actually interesting for board members to see the bridge as it comes in. So we can have that discussion.
Great. Yeah, I will put ourselves in your hand in the timing, but yeah, bridge would certainly interest me personally and probably others.
I'm in.
So David, we'll work on that. We'll have further discussions with the board on that.
Yeah.
And I think Jeannie had her hand up. My apologies.
It's okay. Should we continue with questions, Kevin, on the Portland project, referring specifically to the BTY report, or are we gonna?
We're gonna go to. I think we're gonna go to that next. I believe.
Okay. So I'll wait then.
Yeah.
Okay.
Are we ready to go to the BTY report then? Is that Lisa? I'll turn it over to you to give us an update there.
Hi, so this is Joanne from BTY Group. So pretty much this is a fairly straightforward report. There was no significant concerns. We've flagged related to budget, particularly a matter regarding the estimate of completion. David and I have had some dialogue about that, and we've resolved how that will look on a go-forward basis. So we're satisfied with that matter. Schedule, we noticed that there was some trend of slippage, but overall this, sufficient float, and so we have no concerns about the position of that at this time. We'll continue to monitor. As David mentioned, no significant impacts of COVID-19 have been noted, and the risks per the register continue to be reported and tracked as far as we can see inside the schedule. The big activity is the 90% stage gate. We've had a preliminary look at that, but as David said, it wasn't complete. So we'll be focusing on that in the next report. So it was fairly benign, which is a good thing in terms of our report in this period. But if there are any questions, we're quite happy to field those. Okay.
I had a quick
Thanks,
question.
Joanne.
I think Jeannie has her hand up, I think.
Oh, no, go ahead. Was that Michael? You can go ahead first.
Oh, no, Jeannie, go ahead. I didn't raise my hand. Go ahead.
Okay. So Joanne, thank you for the report. Very detailed, but also, I guess, a bit dated because it was June 30th.
That's the period, yes, unfortunately.
Yeah. So just from your verbal update, you, I guess, have answered kind of my big concerns, because clearly in your report you flagged some areas where you said we're concerned, or you make recommendations. But am I correct in what you just explained to us, that you've since had discussions and meetings with David, and that you're satisfied that these things that you flagged or suggestions or recommendations that you made will be adopted?
Yeah, so what's happening with the estimate of completion is it will be basically, the estimate of completion is going to be updated for the 90% stage gate, which we'll be seeing in this next period, and then on a quarterly basis, and we're going to receive the information about a real-time impact of the tenders and risk realization and change orders. So we are going to be getting that information on a quarterly basis going forward after 90%.
Okay, so you're happy with that?
Yes, we're happy with that.
On the schedule side, you had noted that you feel there's still wiggle room, I guess, ability to reschedule. It sounded like is there one big master schedule? Because it sounded from your report like there are multiple schedules, and it looked like you guys attempted to kind of consolidate it.
No, there is one schedule.
Okay.
I think what we've referenced, what you're probably picking up on, is that there are different critical paths within that schedule based on how many days associated with that path. So but basically, to summarize, we're satisfied that this time it's still tracking as reported.
Okay, and then a quick thing regarding the schedule. You had the Waterfront team is reporting the Don Greenway and Spillway as green, but you said it should be red. Has that discrepancy been resolved with David?
Well, the team's aware of it, and so we'll see what happens in the next cycle of reporting.
Okay. Regarding scope, I guess high water level, maybe we can, I guess, discuss that a bit later. And then the risk register, your recommendation, you said that the risk register is updated monthly, but their impact on budget and schedule is not updated monthly. But is that, again, something that is going to be improved moving forward?
So we're expecting to see everything today at the 90% stage gate.
Okay.
And then thereafter, we're expecting to see that quarterly, yes.
To see it. Okay, yeah. I mean, my overall take after reading your report was, as we're getting closer to the anticipated completion date, I mean, risk is increasing, not only cost, but timing. And my takeaway was, I think we need to increase the detail of tracking, increase the frequency of updates, and increase the transparency of reporting. as we get closer. But you feel confident and satisfied right now that I guess that some different measures are going to be put in place after 90% stage gate.
Yeah, what we're going to be looking for is just that transparency, that when we see a risk, that we can actually track it through, that we see that if it's going to have an impact or it's forecast of an impact on the EAC, that we're going to see that and we're going to see it in the schedule. That's what we're going to be looking for.
Okay, great. Thank you.
And Michael has the same.
Thanks. I think this is probably the appropriate time to ask this question, but if not, just let me know. How do we gauge the risk of general contractors like Ellis Don or larger subcontractors who I think it's fair to say are probably under pressure, just given a lot of them are relying on government infrastructure projects? How do we quantify the risk that that some of these larger general contractors and subcontractors are gonna be okay financially over the life of this project, just given some of the macro headwinds we're seeing because of COVID? And any thoughts on that? And maybe management or someone else can respond to that.
Well, I mean, on this project, particularly Elliston is working as a construction manager, so they're not actually responsible for delivery of the construction. But I think this is probably appropriate that David, you speak to this.
Thank you. I will. Yeah, Michael, at the beginning of the project, particularly at the beginning of the project, as we're going through the procurement, obviously there is a substantial amount of due diligence done on all of the pre-qualified contractors, and we do go through a pre-qualification process for the contractors. As we issue tenders and get submissions, Ellis Don is responsible for that on our behalf. They're looking at the contractors, they're looking at the bids, reassessing. And there've been a couple of contractors where some concerns have actually come up in terms of their ability to complete the project, because you're right, things can and do change, and obviously now potentially substantially changed. So we look at those issues. We do have as we're going to tender, we do have the requirement for bonding for all of these contractors, for all of the subtrades. We try to limit the size of packages, although on a project like this, they are still pretty large packages that we're issuing. But the part of the due diligence is that they must be able to bond. We get letters and performance bonding out of their bonding companies that attest to their ability to complete the work. So the bonding companies are obviously doing regular financial checks on each of these subtrades, and then we monitor what's happening in the industry and whether there are any issues that come up with any of these trades. So it's happening regularly, and we've also got provisions in place because there may be a circumstance where one of the trades is not capable of finishing the job. We would then look to the bonding company to step in and look to acquire other trades that are able to finish the job. We haven't had that issue to date on any of the projects that we're currently doing. We've experienced it in the past, but not currently. Does that answer your question?
It does. Do we? I guess I know you're monitoring it, but do we include that in kind of the farm report in any fashion? And if we don't, should we consider just kind of having some discussion of that? Just given, I know a lot of people in kind of the GC infrastructure world, and they're all under pressure. So it's just a question. I maybe we can discuss further, but. Something to keep an eye on.
Okay.
All right. Thanks, Michael. There's no more questions for BTY. We're going to go to the MNP.
I did have a.
Oh, go ahead, Patrick.
Sorry, I did have a question. Sorry, it was just regarding permits and rules. Just with that 90% stage gate, I just wanted to appreciate if the permits and approvals became more or less important, and what our experience had been to date in terms of, I believe it seemed like there hadn't been any impact. I just wanted to understand if that became more or less important going forward, and if we expected it to maintain a certain rhythm. Thank you.
Yeah, we actually have had no impacts vis-a-vis permits and approvals related to the government's, I guess, reducing services. They've not reduced the level of service that to our experience. So from the city, from the ministries, from TRCA, we have been receiving, I'd say fairly prompt responses to our requests. We've been getting the permits and approvals we require. We've achieved and obtained council approvals that have been necessary, over the last few months. So, and we don't see that changing over the next, foreseeable future. The city secretariat is doing a very good job in terms of helping us to facilitate approvals through each of the departments and divisions within the city as we need them. So,
and as we go forward, will we need more or less? Yep.
Sorry, it's George. I just wanted to just add to David's comment that we meet regularly with the councillors to keep them up to speed in terms of the permits and the requests that we have, and they've been great with regards to supporting us through the council process.
So we need,
Okay.
Pat, in answer to your question, we do continue to require permits. We get release for construction permits for really every part of the project that we're doing, and we're doing it sort of on a just-in-time basis, where the city is releasing. We provide the packages to the city, they review them, and then they release the construction to happen as we need it. So work that is ongoing is currently we've got the permits for that, but work that is remaining to designs remain to be finalized, or the work isn't scheduled to start yet. Those permits are yet to come. So at the moment we've got probably in the order of 60% of the construction contracts awarded, which means that we've probably got still 40% of the work needs to be permitted, including parks, sediment management area. Bridges are fine. I think the Don roadway still needs to be approved. So there's still quite a number of permits that need to be obtained.
So we just want to see things continue as they have. So thank you.
Absolutely.
Jeannie has her hand up.
Yes. Regarding the COVID risk, which obviously nobody can quantify that, time it at this time. Joanne, you noted in your report that there's been no allowance made, obviously within our budget for COVID, because obviously we didn't know about it until earlier this year. Based on your experience and all the other large-scale complex infrastructure projects that your firm is working on, what are other projects doing? Are they kind of updating their budgets to actually include something for COVID claims, or is it just are people just going to use their contingency? And what is your recommendation? Is this something we should be looking at more actively, or just is our contingency sufficient? Because I noted, David, in your more detailed update on the impact of COVID, I know Joanne BTY's report was as of June 30th, but you did note in your report that on July 1st we do have a claim of $598,000, and then you'd noted some other firms that have where we might get potential claims.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm just wondering, what is Joanne, what is best practice you're seeing in some of your other projects, and then what is a recommendation moving forward?
So I think in the next quarter, Jeannie, that we're going to have more transparency about what's happening on this project. What our understanding is that the impact is limited at this point, as David's already reported. And so what we're seeing on all of the major infrastructure projects is, as you can imagine, somewhat of a claim fest, quite frankly. I mean, lots of, and that doesn't mean to say that they're valid. Pretty much everybody from designers, engineers and architects through to subtrades and suppliers are making claims under the umbrella of COVID on all projects. Every aspect of all projects are making claims. So that's the general landscape. And then it's down to each individual project to determine whether or not those claims are valid, because, the temptation is that anything will be blamed on COVID.
So is this something we should be preparing for just we haven't obviously seen this flood here. You've seen this on some of your other projects, but is this something David and his team should be expecting and preparing for and having resources to manage that?
I'm expecting that, you know, if there was going to be a claim, that the claims would be known to David and his team by this point, and to Elliston by this point. So the magnitude of what he's explained is very low. You know, we were seeing claims literally, you know, from the moment that the state of emergency was announced. And right now it's more the realization of the impact of the claim, which we're seeing further details on. But I would certainly believe that at this point, we should have a general sense on this project of what claims there will be.
Okay, so David's more detailed update later was really, by now, yeah, I guess, David, you're aware of potential claims and don't expect, we shouldn't see a flood, I guess, of new claims. Okay.
We sure don't, we do not expect to, no.
So the impact would be more indirect, is what we're trying to say.
Yeah.
Okay, any other questions there? Thanks for the thoughtful input, everyone. Guess we're going to go to the internal audit update. Over to MNP.
And before I turn it over to Veronica and Jason from MNP, I just wanted to give context to the committee regarding the update. So MNP are going to make a presentation on their performance measurement internal audit. Performance measurement was an area that was included in the internal audit plan approved by this committee back in February. And it's the first audit of the 3-year internal audit plan. And the reason or the rationale for including this area in our plan at that time was because we have just recently implemented an integrated performance measurement framework. And you may recall when we reported in our integrated annual report, it was the first time we actually reported actual results against targets for our KPIs. So we thought it was an opportune time, because we're early in the stage of our implementation, to get feedback on our overall framework and make improvements and adjustments where required. So with that, I will turn it over to Veronica and Jason to walk through their report.
Great, thanks, Lisa. I think Jason's online. I think I saw you.
Yep.
Great. For those, I think most know Jason Ducharme. He's worked with me on other audits, and also with Waterfront on other initiatives. But Jason Ducharme helped with this audit specifically due to his subject matter expertise in helping organizations with their performance frameworks and benchmarking and targeting and targets. So he was a key person on this project. So there, I see the project, the slides up. Thanks. So quickly, we'll go through some background, audit objectives, audit scope, work performed, and then I'll pass it over to Jason really to walk us through the strengths and the observations. In the background, Lisa said most of this, so I won't spend too much time, but really this is our first audit of the approved internal audit plan, and it was really selected due to the recent formalization and implementation of the integrated performance framework. Really thought it was a good time to review the processes and tools that were established, and then really work towards that continuous improvement to provide recommendations for this specific area. Our audit objectives were to really answer 3 questions related to performance measurement framework. So the first one was, is there appropriate alignment between the mandate and the strategy and the framework itself? So really, is Waterfront measuring the right things? The second question was, does the framework include effective and efficient metrics, targets, and data? And the third area that we wanted to look at was if there were the appropriate controls in place just to ensure that data is accurate, valid, reliable, and transparent. With the scope, certain things that we looked at assessing was obviously the framework and the target setting process to ensure that there was alignment between the strategies and goals. We looked at the tools that were in place to support performance measurement and the collection and review of data. Again, looked at the controls in place to ensure that data used was accurate, understandable, and reliable. We did also look at the various performance measures and outputs and outcomes, and then also roles and responsibilities within the framework process itself. Our work performed included a number of steps. So first was looking at conducting interviews with the membership or with the members of executive leadership team and staff that were involved in the process. We also looked at documentation, which included the mandate and the corporate objectives, the rolling 5-year strategic plan, the integrated annual report. We also looked at some secondary plan commitments from the city and the methodology that was put in place just recently. We also did undertake a review of current performance indicators, measures, and targets. Okay, so our next slides talk about the strengths, and I'd like to pass it on to Jason to really walk us through the areas that we identified as strengths and then the areas that we identified for some improvement.
Thanks very much, Veronica. So I think it's important to note that this is a relatively new process because many organizations have their performance framework, for 10, 20 years in place, and they've really spent a lot of time maturing it. This is pretty new, and so we wanted to start out with a couple of some of the things we saw that are really a good start. So generally, when we compared the sort of what to measure, your corporate mandate, strategic plan, and the kinds of things that were the expectations and goals, there was pretty good alignment between the framework itself and those core commitments that the corporation needs to address. So that's a good start. In fact, the design of the measures were actually explicitly worked and developed in consultation and with direct regard to the corporation's mandate and strategic plan. So good alignment, that's important. During our interviews, it was also very clear that the executive team has a shared commitment to the process and the framework itself. We didn't observe any either passive resistance or outright saying this is a waste of time. It was a pretty consensus view that this was an important thing to do, and a lot of good support went into it at both the sort of mid-level as well as executive level. At 31 measures, it's a pretty comprehensive list of performance measures and targets that covers a wide range of different activities. And number 4, this is, again, a good thing, is that there's a balance between outcome measures and output measures. Outcomes talk about the things that are ultimately good for society, the results, the intended targets. So things like employment growth, tax increase, awards, those are the kinds of impact that Waterfront Toronto is trying to have. But there's also output measures, which are more directly measuring things that Waterfront Toronto is doing, like the amount of parkland created and those kinds of things. So there's a good balance. We often see too many output measures and not enough outcome measures, but there is definitely both. Again, it is a new process. One of the challenges with any new performance measurement process is you don't have a track record. So it can be challenging to set targets if you don't know what historically, if you've been doing 70% or 80% or 90%, if you don't have that historic, it can be challenging to set the targets. That being said, there's been a good start in collecting that information and trying to develop a process for setting targets that's relevant. So overall, a good start to the comprehensive performance reporting, and the observations and recommendations really are intended to improve and refine, as opposed to saying, listen, you completely missed the ball on this one. So just going through our observations, and you will have seen that, in the appendix to our report, there's quite a lot of detail behind each of these. So I'll just summarize and say that number one, the high-ranked risk is that there's not enough accurate or detailed reporting or an instruction guide on how to calculate the measures. That's something that's critical for transparency and so things like, what is the data source that we're using? What's the definition of certain types of terms? How are the calculations made, and how are targets set? That's the sort of tactical thing that's quite important. So we would expect to see that for each performance measure, there's a little sort of how-to manual that needs to be done. And that's going to be good for two reasons. First of all, it'll increase the transparency and accuracy and consistency, but it also ensures that you have good measures, because there's a lot of different ways. And an example I'll say is that one of the measures is the percentage of projects over 10 millions that are completed within 6 months of the original scheduled date. Well, that could be interpreted like all your projects could be 5 months late, and you'd still have like a good rating, because so the more detailed how to calculate will ensure that the measures themselves are really accurate and indicative of the kind of performance that you're looking for. Recommendation number two, this has to do with alignment between organizational goals and targets. So I think that what we observed is that there's a lot, Waterfront Toronto has a lot of directive documents. You've obviously got your corporate objects, your mandate, you've got your strategic plan, you've got your annual plan, you've got the city's secondary plan, and then obviously you have contribution agreements. All of those different documents have set expectations and targets and strategic objectives for the corporation. That can sometimes be confusing, and in some cases potentially conflicting. So if I take an example, the concept of affordable housing, there is a target in the city's secondary plan that says that 25% of new housing should be affordable. In your strategic plan, it says about 18% for the next 3 to 5 years. And in your annual plan, it's a commitment of 12%. And then, if you go back to your basic mandate, it doesn't explicitly say anything about affordable housing anyways. So establishing a hierarchy of those strategic documents, those directive documents, to figure out what do we must achieve versus what would be nice to achieve, and then also more clearly aligning the measures to your 4 strategic pillars in your strategic plan would strengthen the effectiveness of your measures. Number 3 is something that we often see, which is that your corporate performance measurements should in some way be cascaded into the individual performance plans and the objectives of the executive team and the CEO. And that is to make sure that there's alignment, that what you are pursuing from a corporate perspective is actually incented and included in the objectives of individuals that are leading projects. Number 4 is the origin of this is that the performance framework generally could be characterized as an external effort that's done once a year. We get these numbers together, we publish it, and we say, here's how we did. What that's not doing is supporting monthly or day-to-day or even quarterly management decisions. So the performance management framework is generally an external focus things and not really used by management on a regular, halfway through the year, we say, how are we doing on these performance metrics? Maybe we need to do something different. So we're suggesting that through streamlining, automating, and increased frequency, that the performance framework can become more than just an external report card, but actually an effective management tool that management can use internally to say, how are we tracking this year? Number 5, we did identify a few areas. Broadly, you've got a mandate about access to the waterfront. These days, the concept of access is increasingly including accessibility, like for people with disabilities, as well as diversity metrics. So we're suggesting that that might be something you want to take a look at, is making sure that it's access for all, not just broadly access. Number 6, a greater emphasis on visitor-based performance metrics. This is, again, you know, they say the voice of the customer. It's fine to say, here's how many parks we built this year, but who's going to the parks? Are they using it? Are they well used? So we're recommending some sort of actual activity measures of how much are the infrastructure and the things you're doing actually people are participating and benefiting from. Very last recommendation has to do with the fact that you have 31 different measures, particularly in terms of external reporting. Usually that number is a fair bit lower, and so that's a lot of measures to be reporting externally. Some of those may be still relevant for internal metrics, but I think we're suggesting that there's a process of maybe consolidation of some of those measures to reduce it to maybe a little bit less burdensome effort to collect all that data for 31 of the indicators. So that's a whirlwind tour of our observations. I will go to the next slide. And management response, we have reviewed these with the executives, and in general, management recognizes the recommendations, concurs, and has provided actually some timelines to address the observations. And then just to conclude, again, overall, it's a good start. It's relatively new, but the strategic priorities, mandate, strat plan are being measured, and there's a good balance of outcome and measures. Our recommendations are really to refine, continue that process in terms of better documentation, streamlined, automated, and more useful reporting, and then strengthening some of the alignment between the measurement framework and your strat plan, as well as individual. And then the very last one, just maybe thinking about streamlining the number of measures and what you're actually measuring. So that, in summary, is our report. Happy to entertain any questions.
There's a question in the comment section. Jason, are you able to see the chat for the meeting?
Let me just open it.
I don't know if Patrick
maybe
wants
in the interest of time, maybe just a discussion, Jason, if you could, with management on any insight on those topics, and then they can come back to us at the next farm with an update, just in the interest of time.
That's fine.
Okay, that sounds good.
As long as the follow-up can be noted for the next meeting. Thank you.
Okay, any further questions for the for MFG? Okay. Well, thanks, Jason and Veronica, for that report, and continue to monitor that.
Great. Thanks very much. Just as a further update before we're off, so Lisa mentioned the cyber follow-up, so we'll be bringing that to you in November. So we'll have all the implementation status update and detail of that. And then in January 2021 is our next audit or last audit for this fiscal, which will look at resourcing and succession planning.
Okay, terrific. Thanks, Veronica.
Thank you.
Looking at the agenda, I think the last item for the open session, I think, is the COVID impact update. I know we've touched on it at various times through the meeting so far. Is there something that David or Lisa wants to highlight on this matter?
Yeah, I think, Kevin, just two things. We've in anticipation of a potential second wave, we've been reviewing with the contractor and the project teams, potential Potential mitigation strategies should we find that material availability and/or border porosity issues arise, and as a result, we have been procuring and obtaining materials that we need over the next several months, and they're being obtained and stored on site. So we've done that. Obviously, dependent on the severity and whether governments decide that they need to do more than they did last time, or at the beginning of the pandemic. We will have to address those issues from a labor perspective, if and when they arise. I don't have a crystal ball, and I can't say whether or not that's likely to happen, although I'm hoping it's not. And with respect to the impacts to date, I would note that while we have been made aware of about 600,000 in costs or claims, we and Elliston at this point don't see any justification, don't believe the contractors provided any reasonable justification for their claims, and unless and until they do, we will continue to essentially reject it. So I just wanted to make those 2 points.
And Kevin, it's Lisa. I just wanted to add that we have continued to enhance our technology capabilities since the last meeting. We've fully implemented DocuSign, which allows us to electronically sign key documents, which it's very efficient and it's been excellent. And also our procurement team has implemented Bonfire, which is an online procurement application, which has eliminated paper and also streamlined our procurements. So just wanted to make the committee aware of those 2 items.
Thanks, Lisa. Thanks, David.
I did have a question, if I may.
Go ahead, Patrick.
Thank you. It was just regarding, previously, I believe some of the projects were deemed to be essential services, and so I guess being proactive, if we highlighted or made the case to our government stakeholders of what really would get impacted meaningfully, I'm assuming we're kind of being proactive in that regard, and in reiterating, should there be a second wave, that the number of essential projects that we have underway, and which ones those are.
Actually, Patrick, we haven't done that as yet. We will take the opportunity to do that. Essentially, there are only 2 projects that we currently have underway that met the test for essential at the previously, and they're the 2 projects that are identified in this update: the stormwater treatment facility and the Portland's flood protection. And I think governments understand the implications, because many of the essential projects identified previously were projects that government was funding, and obviously the potential cost implications of stopping all those projects would land right on the government's doorstep. So I think they have actually some probably bigger issues than our projects, but we will make sure that we update the governments as we present to them over the next next couple of weeks.
And just a quick follow-up, I apologize, but just on the PPE side of things, within our contracts, who's responsible for the PPE?
It's 100% our contractor's responsibility to comply with all Ministry of Labor requirements. They are the constructor, so they are and have implemented all of the necessary health and safety requirements and that are mandated by regulation and legislation. They have provided us summaries of that, and we've taken reviewed those. We find them acceptable, but we, as a matter of policy and practice, do not provide direction to our contractors in terms of health and safety compliance, because we do not want to assume any liability for that on the sites.
Thank you very much. That's all I have.
Jeannie has her hand up.
Yeah, quickly, just related to that, insurance. Have we seen any noise on our end, David, in terms of insurance because of we're operating under COVID, or is it all Ellis Don's insurance that covers what's happening?
I'm certainly not aware of any insurance. The insurance that we have, Jeannie, is strictly is comprehensive general liability, which affects third parties. So any impact or negative impacts we might cause to adjoining landowners or third parties. We have builder's risk insurance. So if there's something, if something that we construct is damaged and needs to be reconstructed, the builder's risk policy would apply. And then we have errors and omissions insurance. So they're actually, I'm not sure that there is an insurance policy, maybe apart from our bonding, performance bonding, that would actually apply to anything related to potential COVID disruption. I'm just not sure that there's any insurance that we've had in place on that front. So we'll actually look into that. If there was a shutdown, whether or not any of the insurance would apply, but I'm not sure that it would. And similarly, I don't think that Ellis Don, under their general liability, and we're carrying the builder's risk, not Ellis Don. So essentially, they've got general liability. I'm not sure that their insurance policies would cover for COVID-related impacts necessarily.
Okay. I think if there's no further questions, I think we can take a motion to go into closed session, unless I'm missing anything. There has been a request to have an in-camera with BTY. Joanne, are you still on the phone, Joanne?
Yes, I am.
Okay. Aina, is there a way we can do the closed session and then come back to an in-camera with Joanne at the end?
Yeah.
Okay.
We can probably do that. We just organize it that way. So we will.
Let everybody else. We can dismiss everybody else. So why don't I just, with that proviso, take a motion to go into closed session?
I'll put forward the motion.
Okay. Seconded. I think really there was no matters arising for discussion here, no resolution. So I think we really just have to approve the minutes, correct, Ian?
Correct.
Okay, can I have that motion to approve the minutes? Any comments on them?
No comments. I'll put the motion forward.
I'll second it, Kevin.
Okay, and the last motion would be to terminate the meeting.
I'll second that.
Thank you. Okay, that was a fulsome meeting, gang. Longer than we anticipated, but lots of ground covered, and look forward to seeing everybody at the board meeting, which is, when is that, next week?
October 8th, I think.
Week after, yes.
Week
2
after.
weeks. Yeah.
Okay.
Just before Thanksgiving.
Okay. Okay, well, thanks, George and
Thanks,
Ian.
everyone.
And
Thank you.